Hey, what's up? Hello. Today I want to discuss the irrationality of civil discourse in the modern era. The reason for this is because in contemporary discussion, politics, and even governance, we tend to pat ourselves on the back for often being able to civilly discuss our differences without being at each other's throats. Now, I will admit, I do like this quite a bit. I prefer this to the 1800s whenever we settled our differences with a revolver and 10 paces. At least with this method, nobody gets shot, but I will say that I think civil discourse has its inherent flaws. First off, although bouting out our differences through logical discussion to reach a common goal seems great, I often find that this is not the reality. This can be seen with highly polarized political landscape that we exhibit in the United States, where it seems debate happens every day with whatever issue happens to grace our national news. But I rarely see policy changes that reflect the discourse that happens. I see this every year when mass shootings take their rise to the podium in the hall of debate in the United States. Here, we average more than one mass shooting per day, and the American public seemingly has the same discussion at least once a year over gun control reform. During this time, my social media is bombarded with ideologies from both sides about how we should manage our guns, how it's infringing on our liberties if we do manage them in any way, and everything in between. But sure enough, the 24-hour news cycle does its job and everyone forgets about it shortly thereafter. And despite seeing these conversations on a yearly basis, I rarely actually see any policy change or anything come of it. Rather, the discussion becomes a byproduct of emotional outbursts from both sides and nothing happens. Instead, we're left with stagnancy. The debate goes on for so long that everyone gets tired and just eventually drops the subject. Nothing changes, and a year later we repeat the cycle again and again and again. I've seen this the past few years of my life. Unfortunately, it seems that the only effective means we have to come to a decision is by shutting down our entire government until a decision is made. But the cost of a shutdown never even reflects the value gained from drawing the consensus in the first place. If this doesn't happen, the second alternative I often see is an unhealthy competition. We find ourselves so loyal to one side or the other that when the discourse begins, we close our minds to the alternatives and flat out refuse to be swayed either way. This is a subconscious bias that we all uphold and have to try like hell to avoid. Ideally, civil discourse aims to find a conclusion with the idea of collaboration in mind and finding common ground. And this makes sense. Complex issues need complex answers, and no one ideology can band-aid any of the issues we have going on its own. If there was a perfect philosophy or economic system that addressed every complexity of the world without breeding other problems, we'd be following that by now. But it simply doesn't exist. To quote Queen's 1989 single, "I want it all. I want it all. I want it now." I apologize for that. But we simply will not settle for sharing the pie with those that think differently than us. We want the whole thing to ourselves. But let's say opponents put their ideologies aside and compromise on a decision. Even then, I would dare to say that that's not a fix-all for all involved. Trade-offs have to be made, and any decision in policy inherently disadvantages another. We can't universalize healthcare without raising taxes. We can't allow firearms to the public without risk of them being used to harm one another. And we can't build a fair housing system which does not systemically hinder educational opportunities influenced by property taxes and systemic racism without segregating people based on income disparities. Well, I mean, we could, but that's a video for another day. I suppose what I'm saying is that even in a world where civil discourse leads us to common solutions where everybody wins, we still lose in the end. I think the unfortunate reality is that the fight for justice and equality is a never-ending battle because to commit to any school of thought or to implement any policy, unfortunately, neglects all others. This leads to a grim pursuit of utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. But the harm in settling for that reinforces systemic privilege that majority populations will continue to reap the benefits of on a daily basis. What we fail to acknowledge is that civil discourse is simply a stage that seems to put on a just performance. It only serves as a veil to the atrocities that it produces in its place. To feed one person takes from the mouth of another. I will say that I appreciate civil discourse in that it allows us a means to explore free thought in a mostly safe environment and to expand critical thinking skills, something that many of us shy away from today. I guess the moral of the story is that imperfect societies breed imperfect solutions, but it doesn't hurt to keep trying. Thanks for watching.